I think the purpose of today's panel really is we want to use this as an opportunity to reflect on what has been done thus far. So what work has been done so far in terms of the rail sector reform. So think of it as a dipstick, just to see where we are, both from a transit perspective, a government perspective, and a private sector perspective. As we all know, the role of private sector is to assist us in bringing in the much needed capital for investment to bring our infrastructure back to design capacity, dealing with emergency rehabilitation that's required. And it's also critical for private sector to bring in that cutting edge technology, the know-how, the efficiencies that we need. I think global competitiveness is a key element of what we need to aspire to do as a country. And that's what private sector needs to do. But alongside that, there needs to be the space for government to continue to do its role in terms of its mandates around job creation, industrialization, in ensuring that you can create the capacity to actually allow the economy to grow. So those are the general themes that we want to cover. I thought it would be useful, just as a point of departure, just to cover some of the key milestones that we have noted within the context of rail sector reform, just to sort of set the scene before I then dive into the discussion with my panel. So I'll flag a couple of those key milestones. We can start with March 2022, when Cabinet approved the White Paper on National Rail Policy. I think that was a key milestone. Then Transit continued, and some would argue had already started the process of bringing in and crowding in private sector. Lots of initiatives that took place, the initial pilot process for third-party access, that took on a life of its own. It had its own successes, it had its own challenges, and its own learnings as well. One could reflect on the East London Kroonstad initiative as an example, or the container slots initiative. And then there's, of course, in the background, work that has been going on in terms of the vertical separation, apportionment of debt, everything around accounting separation, addressing human resources issues as well from a transit perspective. November 2023 was also pivotal. This is when the TRIM was established, and we'll get some perspectives from Judith today. Q1 2024, this is when Transit then published the network statement, and we want to go into some of the technical detail around the network statement today. And then going on into Q2, Transit then received a lot of feedback from private sector on the draft network statement. And then as we speak, we're now looking forward to publication of the final network statement and the proposed tariff methodology. And as I understand it, it should be coming in end of this month. So it'd be interesting just to get some perspectives from Judith on that. And there's a lot more that's been happening in the background. As an example, the Luxembourg Protocol was signed in 2022. I think it was mentioned in the earlier panel as well. So in terms of the approach for the panel, we want to start off just with some local perspectives. So we will start with Judith, just to start with some local reflections. And then we want to go into some of the regional reflections as well. I think the other thing we want to do is we want to cover some specific topics. So I'll start with some broad questions around just your thoughts, but then we want to go into some specifics on, hot topic issues like tariffs, what your thoughts are on that. We want to touch on regulation as well. We want to go a bit into the technical. Some of it was already reflected on in the earlier panel around the infrastructure, the state of the infrastructure. And then we want to give some time for the audience to also come in and provide some questions. So maybe just to start, Judith, and I'll start with you, and this is sort of a general opening statement that you can provide, and please be as brief as possible. What is your take on where we are in terms of rail sector reform, specifically from the TRIM's perspective? If you can reflect on things like the accounting separation, apportionment of debt, functions of the TRIM, and more specifically, maybe if you can just give us a flavor of what has been working and what has not been working. What are the lessons that you've already unearthed so far in this journey of rail sector reform?
Yeah.
Over to you.
Good morning, colleagues, and Kujanai, thanks for the opportunity and also allowing me to proceed on the protocol that was already established. In terms of the progress, I think over the last 8 months, we have seen the acceleration of the rail reform and supported by all structures of Transnet, including the group executives, by creating a steering committee to advise on the rail reform, where you'll find that on a number of situations, we sought that advice. But most importantly is the journey that we went through. When we published the network statement in March, as you have already alluded to, and the stakeholder consultation on the basis of the document that Transnet published and that was adopted by the IREC and the Department of Transport. And from that point, we continue to engage with the Department of Transport through letters and workshops. But four critical milestones, one being the publication of the network statement, the workshop that we engaged in. Thirdly, the number of workshops which are really progressive in terms of what we want to achieve. But fourthly, the processes leading to the 1st of October, which is some few days from today, to indicate that in terms of the readiness, we have looked at in our processes as the interim infrastructure manager to indicate that we are at the point whereby we will meet the deadline of opening access. And here I'm not talking about the wholesale opening of access, but there might be a discussion or a decision whereby we open access in routes that are available, because you will also recall in our network statement, we indicated as such to say we are not going to do a wholesale opening, similar to what the electricity industry have done with the IPPs. They had a number of window periods, and that is one of the strategy that the IM might utilize in terms of opening access, but most importantly, without disturbing the current operations of the incumbent train operating company. Thanks.
Maybe just a quick follow-up on that. Can you give a bit of color on what those first priorities will be in phase one? So what can your customers look forward to? Because I think we've got some of your customers in the audience today. Which are those routes that you're already looking at?
Yeah, I think in terms of process, we have revised the network statement on the basis of the discussions that we had with the IREC and DOT. There are some aspects that the general public haven't yet seen, and our view is that we are going to put an annexure on the available routes and to enable the TOCs to make applications. And we have already created a dedicated email that the TOCs can utilize in terms of interacting with the IM staff.
No, that's perfect. Anand, moving on to you. How has private sector been receiving all the efforts that have been put forward by Transnet, by the shareholder? I think it goes without saying that there's a lot of work that has gone under the bridge, and I think Transnet and the shareholder need a big applause for that. But how has private sector been receiving this? That's the first part of the question. And is private sector ready? There have been some questions around whether private sector itself is ready for third-party access.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the stage today. Yeah, I think the mindset of is what are we trying to solve? We're trying to solve the opportunity of creating more capacity onto rail so we can lower transport costs and stimulate industry across mining as well as manufacturing, and we heard agriculture as well. So that's what we're trying to solve. As private sector, we crowd ourselves into spaces where you can deploy your capital and achieve a return. So in crowding out yourself, you need a framework. You need a legislative framework that is clear. And I think the network statement is well commended, and industry has come out very strongly. Today I'm representing ARIA, and we have many industry players here that as an industry, we accept that it's our responsibility to co-create the opportunities that are necessary to growing South Africa. We understand, if we've heard just now the message around the impact on the growth rate of the country, we know if the growth rate doesn't jump, no one moves forward with job creation, and then we remain then in an environment where we're not really pushing the envelope to move forward. So I think industry is very supportive that there is players in the industry. The industry has got many players, both in manufacturing, both in TOC levels, who are ready to step in and be part of the TFROC journey with TRIM. And I think that's an important measure to note, is that we know we're coming onto a network that has an incumbent that has to perform, because that's where the real value lies, is for that performance to jump. If you take TFROC currently at the 150 odd million tons, 152, we know that that number should be closer to 200. So what money are we leaving on the table? That money is necessary for trim in the first place. If you take 50 million tons and at an average trim cost of say 75 rand a ton, you're looking at 3.5 billion rand worth of money annualized that go back into the network. So as industry, we are ready to jump in, to be part of this journey. We believe that the work has been done to at least get a clear network statement. And now the big work will be done to say which slots are now brought on the first phase, and how do we then respond to assets that are necessary to enable that. And I think the point on assets is important, is that any private sector investment is based on asset utilization.
Now, Anand brings in some interesting points around sweating the assets, cost of doing business. The issue of tariffs is a big bone of contention. It's, one would argue, the elephant in the room. How is Transnet thinking about this issue of tariffs? There's been a lot of debate throughout the process and your stakeholder consultation around what should be in the tariff, what shouldn't be in the tariff. Should feeder lines be considered? The regulated asset-based methodology, should it be utilized? What should go in there? Some have even gone so far as to say, look, the cost base is too high. There's a lot that's sitting in there in terms of debt, maybe even legacy issues from state capture as an example. How is Transnet thinking about having an appropriate tariff that actually incentivizes the private sector to come on board? Because some have said, well, Transnet is not serious, purely based on the methodology, particularly on the tariff perspective.
Kutsanai, in terms of the tariff methodology, we have adopted a world-class methodology for determining tariffs, the allowable revenue methodology, which is utilized by a number of infrastructure industries, where we look at your capital program, your prudent cost, your work under construction, your weighted average cost of capital to determine your return. And the tariff that we put to the market was calculated in a scientific approach. But over and above that, we provided a number of options, whereby in terms of our research, where you find that there are similar reforms across the world, you find a situation whereby the shareholder or government really can take some of the costs during the initial period. And in an event that happens in the South African market, you might find that the number that we have put, the current number or the current access charge might change. But most importantly is that we are not saying what we have determined is a cast in concrete. There might be other discussions at the level of government, at the level of the Transnet Steering Committee that is shepherding the whole process, to advise us to say, how can we move? But in our network statement and the tariff methodology, we indicated, we modeled the numbers based on a number of interventions, one being the equity, one other option being that if government have to take over the historic debt, it might have an impact on the tariff. But at this moment, that 19.79 cents per gross ton kilometer represents the true cost of running an infrastructure manager, given that we are reforming within a period where we have backlog maintenance. And our engineering teams, together with independent experts, are coming up with a number around 70 billion rands over the next 5 years, just to take our network to the state that it was previously. Therefore, there's a combination of things that culminated in the rate that the market is not really embracing. But that's the situation that we are faced with as a country. But also there might be other interventions from government, but also on the partnerships in terms of the execution of projects as we move forward, so that we soften the blow on the access charge.
Anand, there are a lot of ways to skin a cat, as some would say. Transnet has chosen a particular approach in terms of the tariff methodology. Private sector has some views on this. Some have come out quite strongly and said it's simply not affordable. Private trains cannot run based on those tariffs. is Transnet being flexible enough in terms of the approach of how you can come up with that tariff? There are other ways of looking at how you can ensure you've got that revenue base in order to deal with backlog maintenance, to deal with bringing up your infrastructure back to design capacity and then upgrading. In other parts of the region, as an example, they look at profit share arrangements, etc. How is private sector thinking about this?
I think it's important for Transnet and government to understand that you can't disturb the base while you're trying to grow. And that distinction has to be well understood. A good reference case for that is Transnet's Richards Bay corridor. That corridor, as you know, is currently transporting in the current performance between 55 and 60 million tons, combining the traffic going to the coal terminal together with the traffic going to the other side of the port. The question that should be asked there then is if that RBCT export-based business, which is an 80 million plus terminal, was designed with a reference financial model. The reference financial model was based on a coal price that will be a long-term trajectory coal price, which always can be projected in that $60 to $75 range. You can't set it where the potential highs could be because you can never predict that highs. So you have to predict the market based on the long-term view on a coal price. Now, on a long-term view of the coal price, if Transnet, that tariff on that corridor as it stands now, is a combined tariff of under 40 cents. If Transnet makes a choice to suddenly give infrastructure 20 cents of that, it will destroy that long-term vision of that corridor, which will erode capacity immediately. So what choices do you have? The choice is to build on the current platform and incrementally put in the legacy underinvestments that's taken place. Because remember, industry believes it's been contributing a tariff consistently, but the money hasn't been going into the network. So you're actually paying twice. Industry has that belief that you unfortunately, as burdening industry, by your inability, you have to put the money in the first place. So you have to deal with that, but you can't also strangle the ability of rail to at least deliver. So currently on that corridor of the 10, 11 billion that exists, that comes to the infrastructure component in the tariff makeup of Transnet, currently that corridor gets about 2.5 billion rand worth of money. It technically, on the tariff structure, collects 4.5 billion. So it actually, there is an inherent cross-subsidization that exists. So that will stay. I don't think you can change that. But the idea is to maintain the base tariff structure and now look for the incremental tariff to gain the necessary money that you need and find these longer-term agreements that allow private sector to put in the money to bring up the network up to standard and find a common formula for that, rather than they're setting a tariff. Because the tariff is to get money. And we're all after the same thing, which is where the money is going to come from. So we have to be smarter how to get the money and not destroy an industry in that process.
Judith, how do you respond to that?
No, look, I think our going in position is that we have a network that we all agree that there was a prolonged period of underinvestment. But the catch-20, now we are in a catch-22, whereby as Transnet, we are saying we can bring this network to where it was before, to the levels of what we have achieved in 2017-18, but that will require a lot of money. But in an event, and we say this with humility, to say in an event that money is not forthcoming, we might end up regressing from where we are today to a level where all of us, the industry and Transnet, will be losing. Because at the end of the day, if Transnet or the IM is not working at the ideal level, the rail addressable GDP will suffer and the cost of doing business will grow. Therefore, the view from the IM is that at some point we have to find a sweet spot with the industry, and amongst others, using collaborations that are on a win-win arrangements, as opposed to one party cashing in and leaving, because here we are in a long-term business. Therefore, whoever comes to partner with us must have that base understanding to say, we want to smooth the prices and revenues over a period of time, as opposed to cashing in overnight and exiting the industry.
So just continuing on that theme of the network itself, and we'll move into the next segment. You've published a fair amount of detail in terms of the state of the infrastructure in the network statement. It's debatable, depending on who you speak to, whether there's enough detail in there, but we think there's enough detail in there about what is the state of the infrastructure. Can you give a bit of guidance in terms of what the roles and responsibilities will be in terms of rehabilitating and upgrading that infrastructure? So where do you draw the lines? How far does private sector need to come in? How far will government need to take on that baton? Because there are multiple stages. There's the first stage of dealing with the backlog, part of what Anand has been speaking to. And private sector may have the view that, look, this is not our problem. Then there's a second part, which is bringing it back to design capacity. Then there's a third part, which is upgrading to increase tonnages on the network. How is Transnet thinking about that and the allocation of roles and responsibilities on the network itself?
I think at the current moment, there are a number of mutual cooperation agreements with the various sectors. And this morning, we had a session led by the Group Chief Operating Officer, where we're looking at options of accelerating the restoration of the iron ore line with the participation by the exporters, which is something that will take us, will give us a mileage in terms of accelerating the restoration of our lines. There's a number of other similar initiatives on the Richards Bay Coal Terminal and even on the general freight business. But what we are looking forward to is to say, as we move forward, those collaborations must ensure that there is a win-win for everybody, as opposed to one party benefiting at the expense of the other party. Because one of the things which is public information is that when you look at the appetite for profitability and you compare that appetite from a state-owned enterprise versus the private player, you find that the private players have a huge appetite. But our view is that we have to do everything within a developmental framework so that we touch their lives and communities where we operate, as opposed to cherry picking as well. Because when we have to develop the network, let's treat the network as a network in a true sense, as opposed to the portions of the network, because the issue of cross-subsidization within infrastructure in industries is inherent. Therefore, we have to take those into consideration, given that when you look back, some of the industries today are operating as a result of the interventions by Transnet, because at the time, when the markets were softening, Transnet contributed a number of compromise its revenue to ensure that those industries are sustainable. But as we move forward, those public service obligations have to be put somewhere so that we reduce the cross-subsidization within the various industries.
Anand, Judith is saying, and Transnet is saying, we're in this together. How can we find each other in terms of the roles and responsibilities to ensure that the network is fit for purpose? What is the perspective from the private sector in terms of how far private sector is willing to go in terms of being in it together with Transnet?
I think private sector is totally accepting that you're in this together, that there's no us and them in the process, that it is a industry decision-making framework to get the same end result, which is more volume onto rail. So if we were all working from that precept, then you always have to be on the table hunting that solution. So I think that mindset is there, and I like what Judith says, these discussions taking place with these industry users, that ultimately the magic will lie there. It'll be the magic between growth in volumes and money coming from that growth. Not trying to price the current base and not achieving the next phase. That's this distinction that we want. It has to come from the commitment to growth, that when you're re-establishing the network to its design capacity, that jump in income will be able to fund that increased volumes. And I think that's why the DFIs are in the room and the various funders are in the room. If the objective is to grow Africa, and if the objective is to ensure a sustainable future for all its citizens, then there has to be investment, and we've heard the investment challenge. All we need to know is that the investment is going in to create incremental improvements. And I think that's where you'll find the magic, because ultimately there is funding money out there. If you're ring fencing the next, I'm signing a new 10-year contract for the RBCD exporters, the requirement on that requires you to put in X money to renovate that line for the benefit of themselves and the inclusive nature of other users on that corridor. You will find the step change that's necessary. Because in real terms, once money is put in, it's like a levy you paint your building once. You get long value out of it. So it's not a sustained tariff. It's about what money I need for that corridor. How do we get it from the 10-year contracts that need to be put into place? And how is private sector contributing? And let that growth money pay for the jump that we need to see.
With that, we will close the panel discussion. I think there have been some very useful reflections on where we are in terms of the entire process of bringing in private sector, some very good reflections on what the private sector expects. I think there definitely has been some good reflection on the give and take that we need to consider. We're in this together, I think is one of the key things. Private sector is willing to be in this with Transnet. And I think Transnet has also indicated they're willing to be flexible in terms of the methodologies of how they get to things like tariffs, etc. So I think the exciting times ahead, and we really look forward to publishing of the network statement, the final network statement, the tariff methodology, and opening up of third-party access. With that, we'll close the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.